What's going on, everybody? This is the Founder Hour podcast. I'm your co-host, Pat, and on today's episode, we sat down with Warren Hogarth, co-founder and CEO of Empower. Empower is a mobile app that helps consumers retake control of their financial lives by offering automated savings, personalized coaching, cash advances, and much more. In the episode, we chat with Warren about his upbringing, his college experience, and where he gets his entrepreneurial bug from, his biggest learnings from investing in early-stage startups as a VC at Sequoia Capital, why he's so passionate about fintech and managing one's personal finances, where he got the idea for Empower, his long-term vision for the company, and his thoughts on the broader global financial system and where it's headed. We started off our conversation by learning about Warren's childhood growing up in Australia.
Yeah, so as you might be able to tell faintly, I still have a tiny bit of an Australian accent remaining. I grew up between Brisbane in Australia, which is about an hour and a half flight north of Sydney, and then Western Queensland, where my grandparents have a ranch still. My parents were out there for a while when I was very young. My sister, and just to give you a sense of size, like their ranch is 35,000 acres. My sister now has a ranch of about 15,000 acres. My cousins have 300,000 acres. So that was sort of my formative years were in Brisbane, occasionally going to the beach for the family holiday or being sent out to the ranch to actually do some real work and grow up. It's pretty awesome. I actually took my kids back at Christmas time to go to my sister's ranch, and it's very different. I have a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old, and like the 5-year-old is on a motorbike because his cousin, who's 5, does motocross. They're on a horse, they're branding cattle, jumping on the back of calves. It's good fun. So it's a little bit different to Silicon Valley.
Yeah, Warren, I'm curious because I don't know what Brisbane is like, but is a 35,000 and a 15,000 acre ranch, is that on the smaller side of things? Is that on the bigger side of things? Give us a little bit of perspective, because here in America, 35,000 acres, and we're talking a city, right? Like that's like Glendale where I'm at.
Yeah, it's roughly the size of San Francisco. So where my folks are, it's about I suppose it's about average. So it's probably 5 miles by 5 miles or a bit more. We muster it all by horse. It takes about 4 or 5 days to muster, about 1,000 head of cattle, and good mixture of snakes and other native animals. But if you go another couple hours west, as I said, you get to like 300,000 acres where you have a small plane to run around the waters a couple of times a week and stop at each of the watering holes on a little Cessna and pump water for the cattle.
I mean, what do people do out there? Like, what's the point of having so much land? Why haven't they developed it? Why haven't more people gone out there? I don't know anything about it, so this is fully educational and purely for selfish purposes for me, honestly, to learn about it.
Yeah, I was walking through in San Francisco. There's this little canyon called Glen Canyon, and there's a bunch of beautiful gum trees in the canyon. And you get this sort of this waft, this smell of Australian gums and what have you. And it's just it's a way of life that's just very, very different. It's very peaceful. People work really hard because you're basically your full-time job is the ranch. It's very hard to take any time off because someone has to be there to make sure, the bore water doesn't break down so that, cattle will always have water, for example. It's not developed because it's very arid. It's close to the desert and it's not very dense. But it's a way of life, and the people out there, they really love it. Kids grow up tough. They're tough kids, and they also like to have fun.
So, you're a kid on this ranch. What's the vision for like the rest of your life? Like, is it expected of you to sort of, go out and get an education and then also come back and, kind of maintain the ranch and live out your days that way? Or is it sort of, did you have like a big vision for what you wanted to do when you were a kid?
Yeah. So I mean, for me, my dad was an engineer, and I loved love building things, and I loved making things, and I love problem solving. And so the ranch was fantastic because you actually get to build things and solve real problems. Like I built, fences, fix trucks, fix engines, all kinds of things. But I loved a lot of intellectual stimulation as a kid. So I was always very curious about what my dad did. Um, I really enjoyed school. I loved math and sciences, and so it became clear to me that I was going to go down the engineering path rather than, I suppose, working the land. But my sister, who's out there now, she's taken up all of that. Although it wasn't obvious at the time, my parents were great. There was no expectation of anything, and really, my sister's made it all on her own actually as well. So she's really they brought us up to be very independent, and I think that's what sort of growing up taught, like our parents taught us really well.
I know you did your college out there at Queensland, right?
Mhm.
And you studied engineering. You then came to the United States. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I did chemical engineering and business undergrad. You can do a dual degree in Australia. I thought I was going to go be a chemical engineer. I had done my summer internship working in a refinery, which for chemical engineers is kind of like one of the most aspirational jobs. I had signed on to go and design refineries around the world for a large oil company. Swore I'd never do a PhD because that was for people who were very intellectual and wanted to go into academia, and sometimes people joked for people who couldn't get a real job. But I went to this lecture from a professor back in, I think it was like my senior year, and he was talking about biotechnology and nanotechnology and the future of energy and biology and where are things likely to go. And literally, this one lecture was a turning point for me because the next day I went and applied to go and do a PhD because I had done my summer internship. While I enjoyed sort of working for a big company, I had had a lot of side hustles and really wanted to be my own boss and create and build things. And I could see that going into engineering, it was going to be about, an industry that had, for the most part, peaked and was still going to be a lot of fun for 40 years of a career, but it wasn't going to be dynamic and changing and at the forefront and cutting edge of a lot of things. And so I actually literally changed tack right there. Applied for a PhD, also with the hope in Australia of taking me overseas. I was very fortunate to get a scholarship and was accepted. And so I started my PhD in Australia, applied for another scholarship to come to the US or Europe. Thought I was going to go to Europe, but ended up winning a scholarship, a Fulbright scholarship to come to the US. And so I spent a year at Princeton on exchange doing chemical engineering research, and it was one of the best years of my life. Loved every minute of it, the people, the professors, and spent a lot of time traveling around the country. Did some amazing skiing, saw some really fun parts of the country, and fell in love with both entrepreneurship here in the US. And so knew I needed to come back.
You mentioned, entrepreneurship and wanting to be your own boss and all that. Why was that a thing for you? Like, where did you get that inspiration from that you wanted to eventually run your own business?
Yeah, I think from quite young, probably from about 11 or 12 years old, I was always had a little lawn mowing and gardening business. I literally sold shit. We had horses, and I would shovel the shit out of the stables, put it into bags, and put it out the front with a sign saying $2 a bag for your fertilizer. And then I did tutoring, and when I worked on the ranch, at some point I contributed enough to make a few bucks an hour. And I think it also there was a lot of independence that came from that, a lot of fun. I got to my grandfather on the other side gifted me a few stock in a company called Mount Isa Mines, which was a mining company, which was one of the largest Australian companies at the time. And I learned about sort of stock ownership and investing, and I just had a lot of fun and freedom from that. And that combined with the fact that the intellectual stimulation, you get to depending what kind of entrepreneur you want to be, but being a tech entrepreneur, you really get to be at the forefront of some of the most cutting edge and dynamic industries in the world that make and contribute in massive ways. And so, one example many years later is I was very fortunate to lead a Series A investment in a company called Guardant Health, which is was building a blood-based cancer biopsy at the time. And it was, 10 people in a lab with the belief that we could take a drawer of your blood in a vial, sequence that blood, and we could see if there was cancer anywhere in your body. And that company is now a public company with 10 plus billion of market cap, and making a difference in hundreds of thousands of people's lives in the US. And it not just helped detect cancer now; it helps you build targeted or choose the targeted therapies to go after that specific cancer, because every cancer is pretty unique. And so, that the fun and the stimulation and everything that comes from that side of things, with the independence, I think, of being an entrepreneur, are just two things that, get my juices flowing. So it's a lot of fun.
Warren, was it challenging to come to the US as a PhD student and just start a new life here? Or was it easy for you to adapt to, this kind of American society, and even just the East Coast is different than the West Coast, but to like what life was like out in the East Coast?
It was different, that's for sure. I've certainly had some formative periods. I remember one of the women I met when I just arrived in the lab. This is a PhD student in chemical engineering at Princeton, which I would consider, a slightly Ivy, university. And she was describing to me how her father had given her a pistol, a gun, to put under her bed when she went to college for safety. And this was just such a foreign concept to me, that somebody would basically sleep with a gun under their pillow, literally, for college, for safety, when there's very low gun ownership, for example, in Australia. And so, like, there are these cultural things that are just like a complete mind bend. And then, another one that still gets me today is the sense of humor is very different, and it got me into trouble a few times. So when you're in Australia and you meet someone for the first time and you kind of like them, as a friend or whatever, you take the piss. You sort of you start to make fun of them, and it actually means you like somebody, like you make a joke about them or what have you. And so I did that a few times over here, and it really rubbed people the wrong way. And I couldn't understand why I wasn't endearing myself to people, I suppose, early on. And then one or two people took me aside and explained that people are a little more sensitive and laugh at themselves a little less here. So those were certainly two really important learning aspects. But I will say it's balanced by, in Australia we have this concept of a tall poppy syndrome, where as the concept is, as people rise up, people like to cut them back down. And I think something that's amazing, to this day about the States is that if this concept of meritocracy, if you work hard, if you get a few lucky breaks, people will generally be very supportive and hold you up and give you a chance or give you a go. And that's something that was really special. And, to this day, I'm greatly appreciative for.
So after Princeton, you get your PhD. What did you end up doing after that?
So it's a good question. So I did my PhD with the hope to start a company. I wanted to develop some technology and found a business.
Any particular technology or just anything?
I wish I was so discerning. I went in with the concept of, hey, I want to pick something that I think could be commercial, something that I had to believe in, and frankly have mildly any sort of talent of mine might be helpful at building. So I ended up choosing fuel cells as the area, which, if you wind back the clock, so this is 2002. At the time, people thought it could be fuel cells instead of batteries that would power electric cars or that would power laptops and and basically provide very high energy density for devices. And so it was supposed to be a technology that was 5 years away from market, 3 or 4 years of a PhD, found a company, it'd be a year away from launching into market, sounded perfect. What we learned was we built some great technology, we filed some provisional patents, but it was a lesson in compounding, which is in technology or finance or anywhere is such a hard thing to really grasp intellectually until you've felt the pain of it. But batteries kept getting better at 5 to 7% a year. And so that means the energy density and their capability was doubling, every 4 or 5 years. And so it basically put fuel cells out of reach. And so my joke was when I started my PhD, the technology was 5 years away from market. And when I ended, 3.5 years later, it was at least 5 years away from market. But I learned a lot. I built a business plan, won the Princeton business plan competition with a bunch of mates, had a chance to meet VCs, talk to startup founders, and realized that I could start something and do something really interesting here. But I didn't want to. My technology, that's where I was very pragmatic. It was not the right time. So I actually had to leave the country for visa reasons, and so I left. To come back, the only way to do it was on a student visa. So I applied to go to business school, and fortunately, I got rejected from MIT, but accepted into Harvard, which I thought was quite ironic as a PhD in engineering. So I came back, and my goal was to spend 2 years where I didn't have a big gap on my resume, meeting great people on the business side, while hanging out across the river and spending a lot of time with the technologists. And I got to do that, and that was an amazing period as well.
In those years of being a PhD student and going to a business school, were you ever concerned at all about making money or having like a career, or were you just more focused on, I want to be a founder of a company and I'm going to do whatever it takes to eventually get to that point? And if that was the case, how did you end up funding your life?
Yeah, so it's I was brought up to be quite, I suppose, to learn to be just sort of frugal. I was very fortunate with scholarships. I had a $20,000 a year scholarship through my PhD that I was able to comfortably live off. And because I'd worked and saved up a lot before college, I had some savings for business school, and then the rest I took out in loans. But just to give you a sense, one summer in business school, I worked on a construction of a gas pipeline where we worked 80 hours a week, and I basically took home $2,000 a week as a data person collecting data in the field, because every hour you worked over 40 hours a week, you got double time, and you got all these other benefits and stuff. So it was 28 days straight in the field, and then they'd fly you home for 7 days and back. And I'd work hard, I'd save, put it all in the bank, and try and live very simply. And for me, the investment was really just in the intellectual side and in me. And I believed that if, the biggest investment you can make over time is your own human and intellectual capital. And if you make good decisions through that, the other things, financially will follow over time. And so it's always been a mantra for me, and it's allowed me a lot of flexibility. Years later, it allows me to leave and be a founder again because I wasn't overcommitted. I'm sure, you've had many founders on the show, but often in those first year or two, you're walking away and leaving a lot on the table. You probably are making no income, and in fact, you might be investing and bootstrapping in the business. And so you need to not be tied into an expensive lifestyle. And so, yeah, it's through living simply and working hard on the side, I was able to make it work.
Tell us about your experience in business school. What were like your biggest takeaways from that?
Yeah. So coming from a PhD, I suppose the difficulty side from an intellectual side of business school wasn't overly complex. The accounting and even the finance on the math side is not, I was doing a lot of three-dimensional time-based modeling of very complex systems. And so this was relatively straightforward. It's much more about the human side of things. You're learning about business strategy and decisions and on one aspect. And then, frankly, as people often say, a lot of it is about the network and the relationships you build during those 2 years. And I think, still to this day, some of my best friends and thought partners are from that 2 year period. And so that was really cool. And then the other thing, frankly, is what business school does two other things well. It allows you to change a career or change industry. And it allows you to reach out to people who would typically say no and just take all kinds of risks and experiments. So with some friends, I helped start a company in business school. This is 2007. We raised seed capital when no one was raising seed capital. So we learned a ton through that process. And then I would send these calls.
What was the business?
It was a fintech business. So we were trying to crowdsource financial wisdom, and with this belief that at that time most good investment advice was published and very expensive and behind firewalls from investment banks and what have you. But a lot of people knew a smart aunt or uncle or somebody who was quite thoughtful, and could we get those people to write and publish great content and earn something from that as well. So we wanted to disseminate that. And then there was this concept of, could we allow people to invest in other people's portfolios? Ran into a lot of securities laws issues, which is very complex. And ironically, ended up competing with a company called Kaching, which almost, 13 years later is a company called Wealthfront after a few pivots. So it was a fun time.
So I know we'll talk about Empower in a bit, which is also a fintech business. And so I'm curious, at this time while you're in business school, how did you first get exposed to the fintech space and what was going on there and finding these opportunities? What was that first moment or something that caused that spark?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think what happened for me in fintech, I think one is early on as I said, when I was very young, my grandfather gifted me a few stock, and I rode that up and down and learned just so much from being an owner, even though, it was, I think, $100 worth of stock or something. But you learn so much from that experience. Then over time, the global financial crisis came in 07, 08, and that wiped out half the net worth of my parents because they'd gotten bad financial advice and they had levered up to invest in the market. And then when the market goes down 30 or 40%, as you know, it just destroys all the equity value, and there was very little left over. And then as coming to this country, I was struck by just how both complicated things were, non-intuitive things were, and I saw firsthand through friends and what have you the impact that was having on people. So, for example, for me, I thought the right thing to do when I came to this country was to pay your bills on time and not borrow money. And if you did that, you'd always be able to get a loan or what have you in the future. 4 years later, when I went to get my first ever loan, I got dinged because I didn't have a credit history. I never borrowed money, but I was like, hey, hold on, I've never missed a bill in my life. I've always had savings. Why won't you lend me any money? And I literally, this was to get a car so I could drive to work. The only way the car salesman got around it is he made me take out my business school diploma and photocopy it, and he somehow managed to use that as evidence that I was good credit and get a loan. And clearly, that's not normal for most folks. And that happened over and over and over. I became this sort of center of gravity for people who had questions about money because it just was this personal interest and passion, and it kind of went from there. And then I met other people at business school that had a similar belief that things should be easier and simpler and we could do more. And again, it's this wonderful time to experiment and reach out to people. And so from finance professors to individuals outside who became advisors or what have you, that was really where it went.
So I know after graduating from business school, you ended up, did you go and start working at Sequoia Capital right away? Or was there a gap in between?
Yes, I joined Sequoia right out of business school.
And how did you come across, venture capital, and why did you decide to go into to that side of things?
So it was a little bit by accident. Like I really wanted to start a business coming out of business school in a company. The company I had founded with these friends, they left. They deferred business school halfway through and went and did that full time. I couldn't because I was on this student visa again, and if I dropped out, I had to leave the country. Um, and so I stuck it through, but was continuing to like riff on different ideas. And what I was doing at the time was I wanted to meet people on the West Coast. I built this amazing network on the East Coast just through hustle, and I wanted to do the same on the West Coast. So I started just emailing people, cold emailing people, and saying, "Hey, I have a bunch of meetings in 2 weeks, like on whatever the 15th of September. Do you have 30 minutes? I see you were a PhD and you've founded a company. I'm trying to do the same. I'd love to just spend 30 minutes and understand about your journey, or share an idea, and love to get your feedback on how I could get this off the ground." And I wasn't flying out there. I had no meetings. I would try and get a whole bunch of them together. I'd buy a ticket, crash on my friend's couch, and go around and meet all these people. And it turned out to be super effective. I met a bunch of VCs in the process, and that was really cool. And I, again, was riffing on ideas. And it was literally a friend of a friend got rejected from another job interview. And he came over to me one day. This is a business school. And he said, "Hey, I hear these guys at Sequoia are looking for someone with an energy background. And it's a technical background. You might want to just reach out," and gave me an email address. And it literally went from there. And at the time, clean tech and green tech were becoming these really big and important trends, including in venture capital. And I happened to have done my PhD and really focused in that area. And I flew out on one of these trips, and I stopped by and met them. I'd never heard of Sequoia. I was reading the bios of the people I was meeting on my BlackBerry in the car park, and I was just myself. And I think because I was just very authentic, it went really well. And frankly, 2 weeks later, they offered me a job.
And did you know anything about venture capital? Did you know what the business was like? Did you know how you would bring in deals? Did you know how to analyze deals? I mean, how much knowledge and experience did you have prior to this job?
So I knew a little bit because through my time at Princeton and at HBS, I had pitched VCs as well as met quite a few. So I understood the concept of I was, just to be clear, I was focused on what's considered early stage venture capital. So this is two people in a garage through to maybe 10 or 15 people that might have raised a bit of seed capital. And we were investing at that point and helping them grow, ideally to be $1 billion plus business over the next 5 to 10 years. And that's kind of the fundamentals of what I knew. Did I know how to pick a great company, etc.? I thought I understood, a little bit. We'd done a few cases on it. But I think I had to be, completely retrained and refreshed once I started. And it really is an apprenticeship. And you do this for a couple of years, and one of the most amazing things is you get to basically pair up with the smartest and leading investors, and effectively, carry the water bag and go to a bunch of board meetings and pitches and what have you. And what's amazing is and I think still to this day, one of the most amazing learnings is about people. And most founders and execs are on a spectrum. Like, you're crazy in one dimension or another. And it all can work. And so you see VP sales or VP engineerings or CMOs that are highly introverted or highly extroverted or highly this or highly that. And you see all of those and how that works together as a team, and how they all need to mix together and to be successful. And so it was really a very, I came in with a lot of energy and belief that I, knew a lot. And again, was a few times had to be pulled aside and say, just slow down a little bit. you've still got a few things to learn here. You might be really excited about this business, but let me tell you a few other fundamental things that might be amiss here, or why we might choose to pass on this opportunity. And it was a huge learning. One I'm very grateful for.
Yeah, I'm curious, what did you learn? I'm sure you came across a lot of startups during your time there. So what did you learn about, the companies that did end up, becoming successful, that perhaps you funded, or you saw some of your colleagues, were involved in those deals? What did you notice, and what did you see? Because I'm assuming, that kind of leads to the venture fund also doing well if they're investing in successful startups. So I know they're tied together. Like, what did you learn from that side of stuff?
Quite a number of things. I'd say some of the big takeaways, and this, as you say, was sort of became the foundation for the thinking of Empower and the business I run and building today. I'd say the first one is very much about markets, and the analogy that I was taught and still share today is, imagine you're a surfer. And let's say the surfer is like the representation of the quality of the team. You could be the world champion surfer, but if it's only a 3-foot swell and the break's in the wrong direction, no matter how good you are, you're only going to go so far. And if there's no waves, it's very hard to create a wave. On the other hand, you could be, 20th, 30th, 40th in the world, or, the B or B plus even, let's just frame it that way. But you've got the perfect 20-foot break and wave, and you get to jump on that wave. There's a lot of mistakes that'll make up for. And so finding a big secular opportunity or trend to be part of is one of the most important things, and that it's very hard to make a market. So one of my first investments was where we thought we could make a market. It was an investment in a solar company where we thought through robotics and what have you, we could effectively create an opportunity for utility scale solar. And there just wasn't a sucking sound from the market. The demand wasn't there yet, and we weren't able to create the demand with our product. And that was a painful lesson, because it was an A team, it was a phenomenal team, and one of the most painful things to see is a great team fighting really fucking hard every single day to win, and there's just nothing they could do about it because the market wasn't there. So those were some of the first lessons. The second one is definitely around team, and it's very cliche. However, one of the things I wanted to do was build a team, not just that I thought was exceptional, but that I wanted to come in and work together every single day with, where I was excited to get out of bed no matter what, whether the house was on fire. I felt I wanted it to be the team that I wanted to go fight the fire with, or whether, things were going phenomenally and, we were running an amazing race, and we were all lifting each other up. And so that was one of the reasons I wanted to found a company, is because I got to build a team from scratch of people I love to work with every single day. A diverse team, a thoughtful team, people that would challenge me, would teach me every day. And then when you find people like that, they hire great people as well. And it solves one of the biggest challenges in building a company, which is hiring. And so people who want to then go and work for these people. So that was one piece. I'd say the last part was just around different qualities of business model and time to market, that you can be too early in a market. And, sometimes you want to be lucky more than right. And don't fool yourself, because a lot of the time some things happen because of luck. And so be humble enough to realize that.
And I know Sequoia, is a historic venture capital firm, has invested in some of the biggest companies that have been known to mankind. And I'm sure, having been so long, deep into into venture capital, perhaps they, like you said, if let's say, you're analyzing a startup and the market, the TAM, the total addressable market, is not, a billion plus, and it doesn't look very promising, they might pass. But, we see a lot of these venture capital firms recently pop up in the last, 5-10 years that are sort of focused on these moonshot, ideas that currently don't have a very big market, but like you said, you could create that market. Is that something that, do you think that that's a sustainable model? Do you think that's something that, we need more of, and that for more innovation to happen, for us to be further along, as humanity, to create create solutions for problems that are societal, or I don't know, situations that maybe it's hard to solve through business, that doesn't have a sustainable business model just yet? I don't know. What are your thoughts on that whole?
So I think you're wandering into what I would call the space of like, what is the right capital for the right project? And so I absolutely believe that, moonshot projects, big swings, however you want to frame them, are critical for like moving the needle for humanity. I'll give you an example. So maybe 7 years ago, there were two very hot companies going around that were pitching asteroid mining business models. So they were pitching, basically, they were going to build rockets, they were going to land on asteroids, they were going to mine the minerals off the asteroids, which are very rare on Earth. They don't know what they're going to be, like what minerals are on there. Just believe me that there are going to be something really, really valuable there, and come back and then sell it. And that was probably at least 7 or 8 years away to go and do it. I mean, just so you guys know, like a bunch of very well-known tech CEOs, invested in these businesses. Some who may have had their Twitter accounts compromised recently. So it was there's capital to do that. Yeah. I won't name specific names, but yeah. So there is some capital for some really, really crazy ideas. I got pitched. I think I'm not sure if I still have it or not, but I had someone ring me up and literally tell me that they had created a device that could make it rain for 40 days and 40 nights. And they were going up and down Sandhill Road.
App Moses.
You'll see a lot of crazy. You see a lot of crazy or out there ideas. Let me call it out there ideas. So there's certainly a space, and one of the things, like if you look at SpaceX today and the fact that we're back, America's back putting humans in space. If you look at Tesla, if you look at some of the most cutting edge biotech, the fact that if you look at a coronavirus vaccine, and many of the leading companies in this space like Moderna and Gilead and what have you are American companies, it's because there's that risk capital. I think the question is just what is the right capital? Early on, I'm a believer. It's the government, the NSF, a lot of the various government agencies. So NSF is the National Science Foundation, et cetera, put tens of billions of dollars into these projects. Even Tesla had a $5 billion loan or something from the government, to save it at one point for manufacturing. So it just depends. I think private capital has a really important place in helping allocate capital efficiently. Upstream of that, there's different places.
So I know you eventually left Sequoia to start your own business, and so when you were there, we often hear, the whole grass is greener on the other side feeling, where you're a VC and you sort of see entrepreneurs building businesses and you want to be an entrepreneur, and then vice versa, like an entrepreneur is looking at VCs like, oh, I want to be a VC. So was that the feeling for you? Like, did you sort of get that bug again that you wanted to create something for yourself?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, it was a little bit accidental the way I ended up in venture. I didn't imagine that I would get the job, and when I did, it was just this insane opportunity to learn and to help help build some really foundational companies. And again, was very lucky. I mentioned the cancer genomics company. There was a Sunrun, which is the largest solar finance company in the country that's public. It's about a $5 or $6 billion company now. Carbon, which is one of the leading 3D printing companies. It was amazing to help build those companies, and then whether it be Dropbox, Airbnb, or Stripe, like it was really cool. I think the thing that I learned about investing and the itch that I had to scratch was actually more of a personal one around um, proving to myself what I could do myself. And so um, I also had helped found another or co-found another company while I was at Sequoia we found this amazing scientist, and he didn't have a business partner at the time, so I stood in and helped play that role through the Series A of the business. But I never taken something all the way through, and I need to find out where my limits are and prove how far I can go. And so that's a big part of it. And I wanted to do it in something where I felt I had an edge and where I felt I could make a really meaningful impact for individuals and in people's lives. And then the second part is around team. The investing is a lot of fun, but it's a little bit like being on a swim team. It's sort of a looser coupling of individuals. You definitely benefit from each other. You're representing the same firm, but you spend 80% of your time with your portfolio companies, not with your teammates. And in a business, you build a team that is fighting for one goal, and you rely on each other. If anyone makes a mistake, drops the ball, you all feel that pain. And so you're in the trenches together, and that feeling, that team, that camaraderie, that's something that I really missed as well, and that the leadership that comes with that. And so it's, people say it's a bit like investing is a bit more like being a coach. This is really about being in the center of the ring, and you're responsible for the bad, the very bad, and occasionally the good.
So when did the idea for Empower come, and how did it come, and what got you to say, you know what, I'm going to go all in on this? Thank you to the VC experience, but time to kind of move on.
So the tipping point in going all in was had my first child, and you start to really think about like what it is that you're doing, and time. It started to realize it wasn't going to be easier necessarily to wait longer, and then in terms of ideas, as I mentioned back in business school, I'd helped some friends start a company in the space, and I had continued for my parents at this point post the global financial crisis had really helped them sort of step their way back out to sort of start to be able to talk about retirement again. For my dad, he's now slowly starting to back off, which is important for his health and a few other things. And in the US, I'd just become amongst my friends someone that people would call up if they're like, what should I do about a 401k, or should I refinance these loans, or what kind of home loan should I get? My mother-in-law, where should I be putting my retirement savings? All of those kinds of things. And it had become so if you go back to sort of the criteria for me, it was, first of all, it had to be something that was meaningful to what we would do for folks. And so Empower is really about, it's a banking app that automates your finances and gives you financial advice and better products. And so you come in, you can open a checking account, automate a savings account with us. We automate financial advice for your day-to-day money to help you get ahead. There's a cash advance product, so if people are in a bind between paychecks, they can get access to instant cash as well. And what we realized is that 70% of people in this country are paycheck to paycheck. 2/3 of millennials lack basic financial literacy. And yet money is at the heart of so much of how we live. It impacts where we live. It impacts our healthcare. It impacts our kids or where they go to school. It impacts the relationship with our spouse. And what we're able to do is, and I sort of sat on the other side where I've been investing in all these companies that were automating advice for sales forces or customer success teams or engineering, like this basic thing, like basic financial advice about what to do better with your money. Like we could do that, and we could help the vast majority of Americans. And so, and what we see is we're able to, help people find at least $300, $400, $500 of savings a year. And in many cases, if we put their savings on autopilot, we're saving them, $1,000 to $10,000 a year. And it makes a meaningful difference. And So that's really where it started. It's a $2 trillion industry. There's all kinds of perverse incentives. And we're like, we're going to go back to the drawing board. We're going to use software to do things cheaper and better. And we're going to create a business model that also makes sure our incentives are aligned to do the right thing for consumers.
So you have this idea. What was like the next step? Did you have to find someone to build the software? Did you build it yourself? Like, how did you go about getting it up and running?
Yeah, so the hardest thing was finding a technical co-founder. So while I was as a decent chemical engineer, and I've done a little bit of code. I wasn't the person to write, an automated software solution that would both solve people's financial problems in a highly secure way, et cetera, et cetera. And so the first thing I did was go looking for a co-founder, and I actually looked hard and far and wide, and I thought I would find someone in my sort of first circle of close friends or colleagues and people I've worked with. And I ran into that problem actually, because now I wasn't, 22 and out of college. Now I was in my early 30s and I had a kid, and many of my friends had kids or mortgages. I ran into two challenges. One is that people had gotten to a point in life where they had committed to an income level that required them to stay where they were, or they, and there's no negative on this, but the hunger and the fire in the belly, the chip on the shoulder to like prove yourself wasn't there anymore. That had happened through the 20s. They had some successes or what have you, but they were sort of, they were happy, family was good or what have you. And I needed both. I needed someone who's willing to walk away because they believed enough and could walk away because it wouldn't mean they couldn't feed their family. And I needed that fire in the belly. And fortunately, it came through a connection from a very good friend of mine to someone I hadn't met before. But that sort of warm introduction, I think, was sort of the catalyst.
And what were they doing at the time? And what was their conversation like? Like, how were you able to get them to join you and actually, buy into the vision and risk perhaps everything at that time to build a new business?
Yeah. So Justin, who's my co-founder and CTO, we met at a friend organized a small gathering of about 25 people, sort of like an unconference of people who might become co-founders or what have you. We met there at this event, and what was very fortunate is that Justin he had built his own company in the past, one successfully and one where he tried and was less successful. And fortunately, he was looking for his next thing, and he had a very strong belief in building software that could drive, improve people's financial lives as well. And he wanted to do that. That was part of, I suppose, he knew he loved finance. He wanted to do something in that space. He wanted to do something that would make a difference, but he didn't have the idea or the business side of the business, hadn't committed to a business around it. And that's where we sort of came together, and there was a meeting of the minds. And so it's very fortunate that, he was at a point where there's a space that he was very interested in. He was very committed to it, committed enough to, we bootstrapped the business for the first 18 or 24 months. We didn't take a salary. We wanted to do it where we were all in.
I remember when I first learned about Empower, it was, I think, in 2017. Alexis Ohanian had tweeted something, and I remember that I wasn't making a lot of money, but I had enough money where I was like, I should probably figure out how I'm spending things. I have my student loans, I have my car payment, my phone payment, this and that, insurance. And so I remember downloading Empower back in 2017, so now 3 years ago. What was Empower on day one, and what is it now, and what does it offer to people, and who are you trying to go after? I mean, who's your target audience?
Yeah. So day one, we decided to start by, the simplest way to think about it is building a much better version of Mint. We wanted you'd aggregate your financial information, and that's where the commonality was. But from there, rather than being the place where you would sort of come and look at sexy graphs of your, what's going on, where you had to both be disciplined and financially literate, we wanted to make it so that we would take that data and do the interpretation for you. You could look at the graphs if you want, but for most people who didn't understand that or didn't have the time, we would just push you nuggets of information and tell you what you needed to do the right thing. And that was working. That was sort of very easy to. That was the MVP, if you want. It was the easiest way with like 5 of us to launch a product and see if there was demand and tailwinds in the market. And fortunately, there was, and had met Alexis as part of that, and that catalyzed the investment that initialized and the team made. What is it today? So I'd say there's 2 aspects of what I've learned about people and money. There's telling people or helping people know what the right thing to do is, and then you have to make it so easy to do it that people can do it in 1 tap or 2 taps. Because if it's not, people don't have the time, like the friction of logging into a different bank account, finding an account and routing number, putting it in another place, waiting 3 days, then doing this. I mean, I don't know if you guys have refinanced a house recently, but I think there's maybe 100 pages of paperwork you've got to sign for something you already own. And it's absolutely bananas. And when the bank wants your data, they literally ask for statements still. I mean, it's bananas. And so where it went from there is we decided to launch a checking account and a savings account and then this cash advance product. We actually started to build financial products underneath it that were seamlessly integrated, so that if we could say, hey, you're paying $300 a year in overdraft fees, let's just get rid of that for you. Or, hey, did you know we could debate? It doesn't look like you're having much success saving. Why don't we let us do it for you? We'll take a couple of percent or 30 or $50 out of your paycheck when it hits each time. We'll move it to the side. If you need it, you can get it back instantly. But most of the time for people, if you set it aside and they don't spend it, it'll just start to build and accumulate. If you leave it in the account, they'll just spend it. And then we use the cash advance product. We use all of this data to then start underwriting people better so that they didn't have to have a fancy credit score if you were financially responsible. And so today it's about integrating those 2 so you don't just give people the best advice. In 1 tap, you can take advantage of it.
I have this sort of broader question, when it comes to, I'm very much an optimist when it comes to, technology and innovation. And I think that, solving the problems of today are going to allow humans to, at least start focusing on bigger problems to solve. And it's going to kind of, push the little things to the side. But you mentioned 2/3 of young people are not very well versed, when it comes to financial literacy. Do you think that that's a skill that is very much needed for other things, just to be able to have? Like, are you teaching in the process? Like, is Empower teaching its users financial literacy, or is it just doing the work for them and they don't really have to know much about it?
So they don't have to know it, but we try to educate and inspire as part of what we do. So let me give you an example. Most people don't know, even people who are have very quite financially literate, realize that if you move the credit utilization on just one of your credit cards above 30% in the month, it can really impact your credit score quite negatively in that month. Very recent example for me, I did this on my business card. I took the utilization to maybe 35%. Then I tried to apply for an Amazon credit card to get 5% back, and I actually got rejected. Again, never missed a payment in my life. My credit score is normally over 800, but it had dropped down to 725 or something, or 730 within 1 month, even though I paid it off in full, because within the month I ran up the utilization. And even though I have tons of other credit available. And so just little things like this, we send someone a note, hey, your credit utilization just went above 30. Let's bring that down now so it doesn't impact your credit score. Then we can start to tell you why is your credit score important. So we first start to try and just automate and solve the problem, and then use that as an opportunity to educate. Another example is just simply, are people spending more than they're earning each month? And a lot of people couldn't tell you this month, are they ahead or behind? and it's a very important thing for 70% of people who are paycheck to paycheck.
I have a couple of questions, but I guess one of my more macro questions is that, in the fintech, banking, investing space, there's a lot of players, right? There's a lot of companies now that are involved in this. And even now, I'll connect with people that are starting new companies that are based on this, right? Either trying to save you money, or recently I talked to someone who's developing a Chrome extension of some sorts to help you literally stop spending money online, not only by notifying you, but I don't know what it's going to do. It's going to stop. It's not going to allow your payment to go through or whatever. So there's a lot of competition in the space, right? How do you maneuver that, and how do you manage your team and inspire them to almost, I don't know, do you have them ignore the noise, or do you have them continue to innovate and embrace the competition? I'm curious about what you are like and how you lead in those situations.
It's a great question. So I think earlier you mentioned like sort of who is our target customer, and that's something that we've refined a lot over the last 2 or 3 years. Earlier on, it was definitely a young professional, someone who was making a little bit more than average, probably making 75 to whatever 150, 200K a year. Now what we've realized is that we can have the biggest impact, and we're having the biggest impact actually for people who aren't quite there yet, that are a little bit low, have a lower financial literacy in that sense, but and just really need help to make those ends meet and come together. And it's teachers or nurses or contractors or Uber drivers. There's many people who we can really make a difference for here and need some help. And again, part of it is they lack some financial literacy. Part of it is it's just very complicated. Like the yield curve inverted, you can go and refinance your mortgage and save money. Most people don't know that as well. But that's who our target is. And this space, what people I think don't quite appreciate is how huge the space is. There's $2 trillion in market cap to go after here. I mean, people are building vertical finance and banking companies in as narrow an area as 4 landlords who are like first generation owners that have between 1 and 4 properties. And like as an example, I have a friend who's literally raised 15 or 20 million to go and do a banking solution just for that target market. And there's so much to go and do there, and there's so much. What it tells you is how much fat there is in the existing system. It costs a traditional bank about $150, $200 a year to serve their customer. We should be able to do that for $10 to $20. And so you can imagine if all of that is given back to consumers every year. So fortunately for us, where we are aligned as a team is that when we see enough demand for our product and people coming to our product, that they're coming from traditional banks. They're not coming from other neobanks or startups. And so
Right.
What I keep telling my team is, if it's up to us, like we will fail because we don't solve the problem we're trying to solve right now. Don't worry about the competition or the other things. People, there is enough demand for what we're building right now. Let's just really, really focus on executing. And I think because, again, the numbers, if you look at just the latent demand for what we're seeing today for our product and where people come from, like the team really believes that. And I believe it. It's not something where we need to get distracted by competition. Everyone's got sort of their own wedge to go after. And there's about 70 million people in our wedge. And in the wedge below that, where people are coming in because they have a strong, need to get their financial shit together, or they need some cash between paychecks because they need to put gas in the car or what have you. There's plenty of people in that market. If we serve them really, really well and retain them really well, we'll have a fantastic business.
You mentioned a couple of these professions that I'm curious about and how you work with them. I mean, for example, teachers or, these independent Uber, Lyft drivers or whatever. Are you as a company more focused on perhaps having a partnership with some of these companies directly, or some of these school counties that have schools under them, wouldn't it be a better way to perhaps work with those folks to then get to their people as opposed to going directly to those people?
So that's not our experience. And I think, although it might, I think on the face value that it's sort of, that would seem the case. And I suppose the thought exercise is roughly this: is sort of, if you go out to these people and you say, why did you choose your bank today? Or where do you get your financial information from? Very few of them will say, well, my employer or my union or what have you put me onto it. They'll say my family or my friend, or I found it this other way. And so the way we go to market, we actually work heavily with a lot of young influencers, a lot of YouTube, Instagram, and these are typically people who are self-made entrepreneurs in their own space, whose financial life often is not particularly great, but could be. And what we're able to do is with Empower, many of these people are now making six figures a year, but they still have student debt. They still need to work on their credit score, etc. With Empower, we're able to help them solve the debt problem or understand where their money's going so they can start to put money aside, start saving, improve their credit. And then they become Pied Pipers for us. And we find that that's a much stronger, deeper, trusted connection with audiences and with people than, let's say, working through an employer or what have you.
You guys have raised about, I think, 25 million now, and obviously you having worked in venture capital, as a venture capitalist, you really are focused on that exit strategy and where the company's going to go and how much it's going to grow, so that those that are investing also make something out of it. What is Empower's exit strategy? What is the long-term goal with this company beyond just impacting the lives and educating people and making sure that people are more financially literate? In terms of the company, what are the long-term exit goals?
So this was certainly another takeaway from venture, which is, from a sort of fundamental foundational point of view, you want to, if you focus on building a business that's going to be around for 10 or 20 years, and you focus on the fundamentals, cash flow or gross margin, and you focus on a pain point that'll be around for a long, long time, those other things solve themselves. So, for example, so what are we very focused on? Do we have have we solved a must-have problem for a large part of the market? We believe we've really ticked that box right now. Just to give you a sense, even this year, our customer acquisition cost, the cost of acquiring one new customer, has come down 5x. So we really think we're sort of the flywheel starting to go, and we've nailed a pain point. We think it's a very large market opportunity. And then we look at the business fundamentals. We think we can, in addition to solving people's problems, I won't go into the specifics, but build a better than a 1 year payback on our users that are people that are going to stick around for 5 or 10 years. And so they'll have a very high acquisition cost to lifetime value. So the fundamentals are there. Now it's, can we grow it to be a really big business? And so if we do a good job of that, we have aspirations to be a public company one day. And that means we have to build a business that can be at least a couple of $100 million of top line revenue and, handy gross margins and profitable. And then, so if you get all those pieces right along the way, if there is an acquisition or, there are acquirers, that's how you get bought rather than being sold. And so, because you've got a great business, you've got great fundamentals, you've got a great value proposition, that's why someone would pay a quote unquote sort of strategic price. And so those are all nice things and nice to haves. It's not something I focus a lot on, because what I learned is if you focus on those fundamentals of a great business, those things solve themselves. WhatsApp wasn't, bought overnight. They were building and solving a pain point around secure communication and global communication in a frictionless way for a long, long time before that. And you solve those and the other things solve themselves.
I'm curious to hear your general thoughts on the sort of broader financial system and where things are going, because innovation is happening faster than ever before. I mean, we're seeing we're seeing some rapid growth in so many areas. And so I'm curious, we see things like cryptocurrency and decentralization when it comes to, the monetary side of things. How do you see the financial system changing, and do you see Empower sort of just like adjusting to what people are doing and how people are, exchanging money?
Yeah. So look, I think, we are, I mean, for all of the craziness that is going on in the world today, and the tension across so many aspects of society, like on one hand, it's hard not to get up in the morning and look at Twitter or what have you, and frankly, sort of have a heavy heart. On the other hand, if we can get some of those things, sorted out, the opportunity to build and create businesses that'll meaningfully impact people's lives, I think, is still one of the best times ever to do that. And fintech's a great example, like you brought up. And I'm lucky. I seed invested in or invest in a handful of companies in the space, including on the crypto side, on the insurance side, on the payroll side, on um, the infrastructure side of fintech payments, etc. All of this stuff is up for grabs. And again, there's so many ways to look at it from the good side of things to consumers. One is just to think of the sheer waste. Like a great example is taxes, right? Like why on earth, when there's so many countries in the world where you push a button to submit your taxes, do we have to make it as complicated today? Like that complication is throughout the financial system. And we're like slowly from the bottoms up, we're starting to chip and eat away at it, but it's going to take another 10 or 20 years. So the last thing I'd say on this thing is the problems are not just like US centric problems. These are global problems. Where I am most excited by crypto myself is really around global solutions. There are currencies which are far more volatile than Bitcoin. There are countries where there are currency controls, or where there are dual currency systems, or where it's very difficult or low trust in the banking systems. And so having secure, safe, low volatile, frictionless ways to move money or to earn money, especially as we break down global barriers for earning. We can pay someone in Patagonia or Eastern Europe or Vietnam. Like there's just like the ability for crypto to like fix and solve so many of those problems is very, very high, and build, especially as trust in institutions is coming down. So how does that relate to Empower? Like actually for us in the next 2 years, probably not in a really big way. We do think a little bit about crypto and supporting people who have accounts and investments there. But for most people that we're focused on helping on, is still very much their day-to-day. How do they make ends meet? And we're really focused on how do we use data to make their lives better. And probably the biggest way, frankly, is underwriting. And in the traditional financial system, we built a credit score system when we didn't have digital, and we had to rely on paper systems, when we had to rely on, once a month, a bank sending a note to a credit bureau to say this person paid off this bill or they did not. And that's literally still how we do the credit reporting. And we're not using the troves of data that we have right now, which would suggest that there are a lot of very financially responsible people who should have access to credit that are being denied by the system today. And so that's the problem we can solve for our people. It's still not solved. There's so much to do there. That's really where we're focused. If you're an entrepreneur, though, on this bigger picture, I mean, there's just, again, the landscape is so broad. If you just pick an area, pick a lane with a big, I've invested in a company that does factoring for and insurance for exporters and global exporters and importers that are small businesses that can't access traditional insurance and systems, because if you're a mom and pop exporter, you can't insure the goods, or you can't lend a loan against the goods that you're shipping, and you have these working capital issues, and that business is taking off. So there's just so much room. So I'd encourage anyone to dive in, because it is really going to be, I think, another decade or two of just phenomenal growth and innovation as we break down barriers.
Warren, you obviously have seen so many different, businesses come and go, so many different pitches, throughout your venture capital career or even now as an entrepreneur. But for those that are not, running a business, or those that aren't venture capitalists and those that aren't angel investors, but they're folks that want to become either entrepreneurs or VCs or angels or whatever it may be, where can they find information, or where can they stay up to date about what's coming up, or some of these even like micro problems that you're talking about that you just kind of named? Unless you really see it and are investing in it or talking to people that are in it, you don't really know that those problems exist. Where can people start educating themselves more about some of the micro problems as opposed to all the macro problems that we always see, whether it's on social or through podcasts, Twitter, etc.? I'm just curious about that.
So I can give you a list of just like a few ideas. I'm sure there's many others, but there's some really good thought leadership um, or being written by a handful of different folks. But if you like, one example is Andreessen Horowitz, the team there, Angela and Alex Rampel and a few of the others. They do, I think, both through their podcast and through written newsletters. For example, they cover a lot of really interesting themes. Like they did a podcast on, oh man, I'm trying to remember what it was, like 6 months ago, on like reimagining the credit score and using cryptos. Like it's a great, they are great thought leaders in this space. The guys at Ribbit Capital are great thought leaders. There's a handful of individuals you could follow on Twitter, like Jake Gibson. I'm just throwing out some names of folks just because that could be helpful to people. I'm sure there's many others, but Jake Gibson, who is one of the co-founders of NerdWallet on Twitter, for example, or Sheil Moot, who's on there as well. That's again a US centric. On the crypto side. Like I'm invested in this company called Cello Labs, and people from all around the world can develop for them, work on the protocol, join boot camps. They sponsor people to hack on their system or to develop or what have you, and many of these companies do. So I think one is to find some thought leaders on Twitter or newsletters that you can read. Another is to pick some of these companies and just join one of their hackathons or problem solving workshops or opportunities. Another one is to pick one of the companies, Coinbase, Robinhood, us, whomever, New Bank in Brazil, wherever you are, and just go work for one of these companies for 1 or 2 years. Just find a job, work out how you can get in there, impress them, I don't know, write some code or use the product, send the product manager like your analysis, the good and the bad. I mean, it's like just doing something like that gets your foot in the door, and I think it unlocks the window that you're into the future.
That's amazing advice.
Just to wrap things up, I know building a company is a shit ton of work. So what do you do when you're not working? What do you do on the side, just like weekends, or just to stay sane?
It's a good question. So I love spending time. I used to go like kiteboarding and cycling and skiing and fun stuff like that. These days, I've got a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old, and so just hanging out with them and teaching them to ride a bike is frankly really fills my cup in many ways. And I love to read still. I read and stay up on a lot of trends and continue to do some seed investing and mentoring folks. That's really nice. And occasionally,
What kind of books do you like reading? I mean, is it like mostly, story based, nonfiction, fiction?
it's less books, to be honest, and it's more like I'm reading about GPT-3, this latest AI thing out of OpenAI, for example, or um, I subscribe to the Financial Times, The Economist. I try. It's more of a. It tends to be frankly more. Or I read stuff on longevity. I'm sort of very curious on some of the latest research and stuff coming out around our ability to basically rejuvenate ourselves. And so it tends to be a bit more research and academic paper related kind of things is what I tend to read. And then if I have any time left over, I'll try and go for a run. That's about it.
Love it. Well, this has been amazing. Thank you for hanging out with us on this beautiful Sunday and sharing your story and what you're doing with Empower. It's amazing because I think it's something the world really needs, and we can't wait to see what happens next with you guys and just the whole industry as a whole. And so appreciate the time.
Awesome, guys. It was really fun to come on today, and I wish I could have been there in person in LA. I was actually trying to, but the good old coronavirus obviously has made it very challenging. So this is certainly the next best thing.
Well, next time you're out here, just let us know and we can grab a drink or something and catch up.
That'd be a lot of fun.
Thanks, Warren.
You got it, Warren.